Welcome everyone! In today's beginner-friendly Dreams 2 tutorial, we're going to be creating this floating island with a waterfall. I'm really excited about this tutorial because it does a great job featuring the Dreams 2 updates in a fun and hands-on project. Along the way, we'll run FLIPBOOK through its paces, get the most out of our keyframes, and nail the art of looping our animations. Okay, so the only thing you'll need for this project is this background I've prepared for you. You can grab it for free using the link below, or better yet, scan the QR code to download it directly to your iPad. All you have to do is find the camera on your iPad. From here, you're going to point it at the code and wait for the yellow link to appear before tapping on it. With the template in our browser, we can hold down on it and choose Save to Photos from the options. Now we're ready to open up Procreate Dreams. For the size of our project, we're going to go to the plus sign and find the square option and choose empty. And I like to push this panel down to make my screen a little bit bigger. Now we're going to go to our settings and choose project here. And for the frames per second, I'm going to change it to frame by frame animation at 12. For the duration, I'm going to set it to 5 seconds. Now we're going to go to timeline and set our project to loop. Let's insert our background. So we're going to go to the plus sign and we're going to choose photo here. And that's where you're going to see that background that you downloaded. And everyone's screen is going to be a little bit different depending on your iPad. So you just have to tap on your screen and then you can use this circle to kind of expand it. I like to go just a little bit over the edge just so that there's no like white gaps. Okay, great. So let's jump into drawing. So I'm going to go to the plus sign and I'm going to start a new track and then again to the drawing option. So if I go to my brushes, I'm going to do a big pinch and just make sure I'm in the animation brushes. And I'm going to be going to outline and finding the Lapwing brush. At any point, you can also scroll down and use the search bar to search by typing in the name of the brush. And then for my size, I'm going to be using around 40%. So we're going to be drawing our island, so I'm going to find a nice brown color. So that's in your orange section, and this is kind of like a grayish brown. And then right between the ocean and the water here, I'm going to start off with a really poorly drawn triangle like this. Okay, so now we're going to fill that shape in, and you're just going to double check that you don't have little gaps left over. If that happens to you, you want to hold your brush down and then shift it left and right to increase the threshold. That controls how the color fills, and it's a really important thing to know about. Okay, great. So I don't want the edges of my island to be like so straight. So I'm going to just kind of add in a few little natural kind of shapes here and there, kind of basically rough up your island a little bit. Okay, great. And then I'm going to take this color that I have and I'm going to darken it a little bit. So I'm going to go down and then to the right. And I'm going to make my brush a little smaller, maybe 20%. Now I'm imagining the light is kind of coming from the left side and I'm going to add some texture. So this texture is going to kind of be everywhere, but primarily on the right side where we're going to see our shading. So we're just kind of adding these little textured elements here. But we want this island to be kind of a lush island. So we're going to go to our green section here. I'm very partial to like an olive green. So I'm going to grab this color, but really it can be any green that you want. And I'm going to set my brush size back to 40%. And I'm going to add my grass on top. So I kind of like to think of this as kind of like an ice cream cone. And now I'm adding like the ice cream portion. Now, remember there's going to be a waterfall coming out of the top of our island here. So we don't want this to be like too bumpy right in the middle. So I'm going to kind of do something like this, but you can kind of have fun with what this shape looks like. And you can do a combination of coloring it in and then also using your brush to kind of get any little parts that maybe got left over. Okay, lovely. And then I'm also going to make my brush a little smaller, maybe like 15%. And then I'm going to add little bits kind of hanging off the edge here. I guess these are like little viney shapes, just to kind of give our island a little bit more personality. Okay, and then now that we have our form kind of figured out, I'm going to use the arrow and I'm going to make sure it's set to uniform And I might need to make my island a little bit bigger, so it's just kind of taking up this space in a more efficient way, and maybe I'll rotate it to make it feel like it's not lopsided. So we're just gonna make those final adjustments before we move on. So we're gonna jump into some shading, and I'm gonna go to my layers and start a new layer. And this layer is gonna be a clipping mask because I want my shading to stick to my island. And then we're also gonna get into blending modes. So I'm gonna go to the N, and instead of N for normal, I'm gonna switch to linear burn. Linear burn is great for shading because you always use a light gray color. No matter what the situation is, you can use that color there. So the lighter your gray color, the lighter your shading will go on. And I have my brush size set to 50%, and I'm gonna shade the right side of my island. So this is really great when you have multiple colors that you're trying to shade. So it's kind of picking out the perfect shadow color for me. So for the brown, it looks really nice. And then watch this, when I shade the grass, it also adjusts to that color and just gives me kind of a stress-free way to shade textures and multiple colors. So I have the right side shaded. I'm also gonna do some shading underneath the grass here because the grass is casting a shadow on our island, and then also on this section of my grass. This is like the bottom underside, so it will get some shading as well. So it will kind of look like this. And then maybe I'll make my brush a little smaller and some of the shading kind of comes in a little bit, does these funky little shapes. Okay, wonderful. So that's our completed island. So now we're gonna go to drawing and finish our drawing here. Okay, great. So let's do the waterfall. So the waterfall also needs its own track. And then I'm gonna go to the plus sign and select drawing again. So let's pick out the color of our waterfall. So for me, it's gonna be like a blue color like this. I can always easily update it later. So just do your best to kind of pick a color that you think will work. So Procreate Dreams 2 still doesn't have shapes at this moment, but we can kind of get around that. So we're gonna go to our S tool and we're gonna set rectangle because I want nice straight lines. And then I'm also gonna select color fill here. And I'm going to create the shape of my waterfall. So it's gonna be kind of in the middle and it's not touching the bottom. It's kind of between the bottom of the island and the bottom of my canvas here. So it's going to look something like that. And when you release your pen, it's going to automatically color it in. Now don't worry if you didn't get your proportions just right. This is where the arrow tool and freeform are going to come in really handy. So I can move it around obviously to center it. And then if my waterfall was like too skinny or whatever, you can kind of adjust it here, so we can get it exactly where we want it. So for me, that looks pretty good. And then if your color is not quite right, now we have the magic wand and you can go to hue, saturation, and brightness, and you can just make little adjustments to the color. Okay, so now let's take a look at the top of our waterfall. We actually want it to be a little bit rounded. So I'm gonna go to my brushes and go to monoline, and I'm gonna use this one, Banjo. So if I tap on it, I want to increase how smooth this brush is. So the first slider goes all the way up, and then there's 4 more sliders. I'm just gonna put those in the middle like this. They don't have to be exactly 50%, just anywhere in the middle is fine, and that should work pretty well for us. The size of my brush is 10%, and I'm just gonna draw a very gentle curve. Like, it should almost be a straight line, but it's just a little bit curvy like that. Great, so that's all we need for our waterfall, and then we're gonna go back to our timeline. To create the illusion of the water moving, we're gonna create stripes here on our waterfall. So again, we're gonna go to the plus sign and start a new track, and this one is also going to be a drawing layer. I'm gonna pick a color that's white with maybe just a tiny little bit of blue. I still have my Banjo brush, but I'm gonna change the size to 25%. And what's really important about this step is to proportion your waterfall right in the middle. So from the top to the bottom, I'm gonna start my highlights here in the middle. And the highlights are kind of like a narrow band of these really scattered kind of lines. And I actually want you to go over the edge a little bit. We're gonna go back and change this track to a clipping mask so it clips onto our waterfall, but we can't do that in this view. So just kind of trust me and go over the edge a little bit. So this is what the highlight looks like. And now I'm going to copy and paste 2 more of these. So here's my layer. I'm going to swipe left and duplicate it, and then use the arrow to kind of get it right in the middle from here to the top of my waterfall. And this is a really good strategy in animation, is looking for the middle and dividing things. Sometimes that can help you, especially if you're trying to do a loop. So I'm going to do one more here. Okay, so let's just do a final check and make sure everything lines up. So I'm going to use kind of a reference point. So this little part of my waterfall, I can see how it touches the edge. And so I'm going to go through each of my layers and make sure that they're touching in the same spot, because I want them to line up as best as they can. So I'm trying to get it on the line. So obviously yours will be a little bit different. So you're going to have to look for your own kind of reference point. So these stripes are going to be moving down, and as they do, there's going to be this empty spot here that needs to be replaced by a 4th stripe. So I'm going to duplicate my layer, and then I'm going to put a 4th one here. And again, I'm trying to make sure that my spacing is really nice and even. And don't worry if this stripe doesn't even touch the waterfall at this point. It can be completely hidden, and that would be okay. To move on, we're going to go back to our timeline. So I'm going to hold down on this track with the stripes, and I'm going to go to mask and then clipping mask, and check this out. Now the stripes clipped to the waterfall underneath, and you can see how this will work in our animation. Let's get into our first animation for this project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in, and I want to be able to see from 0 to 1 second. You can also take 3 fingers and slide them up to make the tracks a little bit bigger, and then I'm on the compose mode here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the line here at 10 frames. So you can see the frames here like this. And when I hold down, I'm going to select split content. And I'm going to delete the right side. So if I hold down on it, I can delete it. So now we have this little clip here, and that's going to allow us to move our stripes down. In our animation, we're going to be taking this stripe and pushing it down so that it replaces this one, but we need to be quite precise about this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my plus sign and start a new track and go to drawing. And this is going to be temporary, so you can literally use whatever color you want, and I'm just going to draw a mark here so that I know where to stop. Okay, so back in our timeline, let's go to that little clip that we created. And I'm going to jump into keyframes. And here's my action button. I'm going to move it as close to the end as I can. Sometimes it doesn't like to touch the end exactly, so just get it as close as possible. And then we're going to go to the action button, go move, and move and scale. That's the type of keyframe that we're setting. And for the end of our animation, or this little part of it, I'm going to take this stripe and replace this one. So I'm going to just kind of really watch here, and I'm going to replace it like that. And actually, you don't want it to touch the same spot. You want it to be just a bit above. So if this was the correct spot to replace it, I'm actually going to push it up a little bit. It's basically like 1 frame short to really create that loop. Now, don't worry if you kind of shifted it left and right. Just kind of do your best to put it where you think it should be. We're going to fix that in a more specific way, but for now, that's all we're looking for. So to correct the left and right, what we're going to do is we're going to hold down on the keyframe bar right here in the middle, and we're going to go expand, move, and scale. So the left-right movement is our X coordinate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down on the X here at the start. I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to hold down on the end position and paste that information. That's going to control the left and right. So now we can test things out. So for now, I'm going to just turn off that red bar. Don't delete it, just turn it off for now, and then we can test things out. So a really important thing to understand about testing is that it's going to play what you can see on your timeline. So we want to make sure that we zoom in like this. So the ends of my screen are kind of touching the ends of my animation. And that's going to give you a really clear picture of what's going on. The next thing you can do is you can do a 4-finger tap on your screen to go into full screen mode. This really helps you understand what the animation feels like. Okay, great. So I kind of nailed it here on the first try. It looks like a continuous loop. So I really think if you kind of followed all those specific steps, you're probably going to be really happy with what it looks like. Okay, so here's my back button. And if you're happy with it, we can kind of shut this down. So I'm going to hold down on the keyframe bar and go collapse, move, and scale. And then I can just delete this layer here with my guide. Okay, so let's get into some flipbook stuff because I really like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the start of my animation and I'm going to start a new track. And this time we're going to go into flipbook. And let's just scroll through and see how many frames we're dealing with. So that's too many frames. That doesn't line up with the stripes moving down. So I'm actually going to go back to my timeline and see how my flipbook is much longer than my drawing. So first of all, I want to make sure my flipbook starts at 0 seconds. So I might have to remagnetize it. And then I'm going to just shorten it so that these two pieces are exactly the same size. And I'm going to go to edit flipbook. Okay, great. So now it's 9 frames, which is perfect. So I want to create a nice straight line that's level. And it's really hard to do that with my brush. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my S tool, set it to rectangle and turn on color fill. And then I'm just going to draw basically something that looks like a straight line like this. And for some reason my color fill is not working. It might be because I'm on a new layer here. So I'm just going to fill it in myself. It'll still work. And then of course you can kind of move it around. So you want it to be like almost touching the bottom of your waterfall and be kind of centered. And honestly, I think my line is a little bit too long. I'll probably shorten it like this. So make sure you're on freeform to do these adjustments. It kind of helps. So this is always going to remain the base of my splash. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down on this and I'm going to set this to 9 frames. Great. And then we could have multiple tracks in our flipbook, which is really cool. So I'm going to press this button here and we're going to use the Moray brush. And then I'm going to set my color to a pure white. So if you just kind of tap in this section here, like a double tap, it will set it to pure white. Set the brush size to 45%. And then I'm going to start to draw the kind of like basically cloud shapes here on top of my splash line. And I can even extend this section here to kind of make it look like that. But before I color it in, I'm actually going to just redraw the line here because remember that's not actually on this layer. So I'm going to just redraw the base and color it in, or you could just kind of do it by hand. I missed a little section right there. So that's my splash, and then because it's a splash, it's like foam and splash, there's like little splashes coming out of the top. And now I'm going to move on to my next page in my flipbook. So you can see how that line is going to be very helpful, but the rest of the splash kind of moves really fast, so it doesn't have to kind of really follow a pattern, which is something I really like about it. The only kind of pattern I'm going to try and follow is if I do a splash, the splash is going to kind of continue its path and get smaller every time it moves further away from the splash. And then I'm also going to just start like new little splashes. So at this point, my onion skins are actually kind of getting out of hand. So I'm going to go to the wrench right here and I'm going to find my onion skins and I'm just going to change this to 1. So I want to be able to see 1, but not more than that. And this is going to help me stay sane during this process. So you can get really kind of expressive about what your splashes look like. So you can be expressive, but also stay consistent. This does seem to be the kind of challenge of animation. At some point, your splashes are going to kind of exhaust themselves and turn into nothing. So I usually do like 3 continuations of the path and then I stop. And really the best advice I can give you is to always be testing out what you're doing. And the new flipbook design makes that so much easier. So I can just scroll through and I can get a real feel for what my animation looks like and any sort of issues. So I can see there's like a missing little spot there. So I'm going to make sure I fix that. Okay, so if you really love drawing the splash, I would just draw all 9 frames. It's not that much work, but animation is all about efficiency. So we actually now have a group button that I wanted to show you. So what I can do is turn that on. I can select all of the frames I finished, and then when I hold down on them, I can duplicate them. And essentially, let's try this out. I'm going to play it That looks pretty good to me. So test it out, make sure there's no issues, fix those up, and if you're happy with it, we can move on to the final details. So back in my timeline, I'm going to just make sure I'm on compose, and I'm going to zoom out. And one thing I noticed about my splash is that I feel like it's a little bit too small. So I'm on my flipbook here, and I can actually just make this a little bit bigger. And you want it to be like almost touching the bottom of your waterfall. So it's kind of hiding the bottom part. And then just test it out to make sure you're happy. So anytime you make a change, always test before you move on to another step. So that looks pretty good. And now I want to zoom out. And the way you can do that is a quick pinch, because I want to be able to see from the beginning to the end of my movie here. And we're going to duplicate these two little patterns that we've set up. So here are my stripes, and I'm going to use this option, duplicate after, because there's a lot of different versions of duplicate, so you want to make sure you're using the right one. So if you hold down on the track, you're going to keep duplicate after, and you want to get to the end of your track here. And I wish there was a faster way to do this, but unfortunately, you just have to do it one at a time. Now, when you get to the end, one of your pieces is going to go over the edge. And because this is an infinite loop, I actually want to extend my timeline out a little bit. So there's a little handle right here, and I'm going to match it with the end of this last clip. Now, it's important that all of your tracks are the same length. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these ones here and also extend them out. These ones don't have an animation built into them, so I can just stretch them out. If you have an animation like the stripes or the splash, you can't do that. That will create empty frames and really mess with your work. Okay, let's do the same thing for the splash. So I'm going to go duplicate after so many times. And anytime I do a duplication like this, I'm definitely going to review my work. So I'm zoomed out, I can see from the beginning to end, and I'm just going to test the entire thing out, just make sure I'm happy with it. So for the final animation, we're really going to get into some grouping. So I want to make it look like the island is moving up and down as part of this, but I actually don't want the splash to be moving because the base of where it's falling into the ocean is going to stay the same. And I'm going to group the stripes, the waterfall, and the island. Making sure I'm still zoomed out, I'm going to turn on the group button, and I'm going to do a big circle around all of these tracks. And you can see they're all selected in red. Now it doesn't matter which piece you hold on to, so I'm going to hold on to this one, and I'm going to select group. And now you can see how grouping also organizes everything, which is really nice. Now, this is a really important tip. Make sure you always turn off group. Group can cause lots of issues when you're trying to do other stuff, so it's best to always turn it off. And then I'm going to do the 3-finger swipe to get a closer kind of view here. So let's go back to keyframing, and you're going to be really surprised at how easy this is. So I'm going to go to the start of my animation, and I'm going to go move and scale, and lock in my keyframe. Now, the island is going to be moving up and then back down really gently. So I want to make sure I lock in the starting position and the ending position because I want my island to kind of go back to where it started. So locking in your beginning and end is really important. And then the middle is where the action is going to be happening. So I'm going to set my keyframe here in the middle, and this is where I'm going to move my island up. Now there's a limit to how far you can move it up. You can't have the bottom of your waterfall separate. So I'm going to move it as far up as I can. So for me, it's like this. And honestly, that might be a little bit too far. We don't want our island to look like it's a roller coaster. So again, we're just going to review our work here and just make sure that's like kind of soft and gentle. And that's it, my friends. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you had fun and picked up a few new dreams tricks along the way. I post new tutorials every week, so if you enjoyed this one, don't miss the next great project I've got cooking. Later, Gator.